Hello my fellow freedom builders, and welcome back to a video that I have been looking forward to. I've been doing a lot of research about hydrogen lately, and this video is about the core basics of the hydrogen sector. Now, the last videos I have made have been a lot about the Nikola stock and their hydrogen driven semi-trucks and so on, but today we're not going to talk specific stocks. Today is more about if you want to invest in the hydrogen sector, then what do you need to know? There are some basics we need to know, and we'll have a look at them. Remember that if you want to participate in our little lottery where you can win a 1-ounce silver coin, you need to comment in the comment section below. And while you're down there, remember to subscribe and like the video. All right, let's get to it. Now, we're not going to talk too much about the electrical cars, the EVs today, but we are going to use them as a comparison to the hydrogen because it is a good space to be in here when we discuss the hydrogen. It is easy for many of us to relate it to the electrical and of course to the diesel and gasoline driven trucks. So let's get into this discussion where I know I am moving into something between a professional boxing match and a religious debate here, because I know it is a very emotional driven here. Someone really swears to the hydrogen sector and someone says no, it is completely ludicrous. We know that Elon Musk from Tesla, he has said that instead of fuel cells, he called them for fool cells, and he has called it mind-boggling stupid to put money and research into the hydrogen sector. But let's get to it anyway, because if you ask me, I'm pretty sure that hydrogen will have some sort of space and place in the future of fuel, but maybe not as the primary fuel source. We'll have a look at that today. Now, first of all, let's understand what the difference between the electricity-driven vehicle and the hydrogen-driven vehicle is. Because what hydrogen is, it is called the most abundant material in the universe. And that is true. I'll get to that in a second, why it is not completely true. Of course, it is the most abundant, but it is hard for us to get because we need to split the water molecules up to get it, and that is kind of a energy intensive process. So here we have an electrical car and a hydrogen car. In this case, they're both powered by solar panels here. That could of course easily be some power plant with coal or oil or natural gas or whatever, but right now let's just stick to the solar panels because that simplifies things a bit. Now, the solar panel generates some electricity with help from the sun here, and that goes straight into the battery of the electrical vehicle, and it is ready to drive. There is minimal loss of energy here. I'll get back to that in a second, but let's first have a look at the hydrogen vehicle. Now, the hydrogen vehicle has its solar panels here. The electricity goes into this process where you split up the water molecules. The name for water molecules here is of course H2O, and what we need to have is the H2 separated from the O, and that takes a lot of electricity. Now then you get some hydrogen gas bubbling up from this water, and that is let a hose into some sort of storage capacity. Now you can store hydrogen in its gas form, then you need some a lot of pressure, which takes energy to pressurize it, or you can store it as a liquid, and that takes a lot of energy because you need to store it very, very cold. But again, I'll get back to that in a second. Then you have the hydrogen stored. Of course, it could be that you make the hydrogen the place where your hydrogen tank station is. That is what Nikola has proposed they would do for their semi-trucks. So if that is the case, of course, you don't need the distribution. You just produce the hydrogen on spot. But otherwise, you can put it into a truck and you can drive it out to the tank station where you can put it into the hydrogen vehicle. And then both in the electrical vehicle and the hydrogen vehicle, we get some loss of energy in the transformation to rubber to road energy here. But again, we'll look at that in a second. So this is the process, and this is why at the moment hydrogen has some problems being competitive on the price compared to, for instance, electricity in an EV, because there are a lot more processes where you lose energy. And that is, of course, where a lot of research is done these years. How can we make this process easier? Also, now we call this an electrical car and this is a hydrogen car, but just remember, both of them are actually electrical vehicles. This one just gets the electricity, the power straight into the batteries and then drives. This one gets hydrogen into the tank and then produces its own electricity to drive the car. So at the end, they are actually both EVs. This one just produces its own electricity. This one gets it stored in the batteries. That is an important point to remember. All right. When we look at the process here, the reason why fuel cells are more expensive, then we can see that we have the fuel cells here, we have the battery efficiency here. And when we look at that, we can see that all from the charger, electrolysis, compression, fuel cells, inverter, motor, we lose a lot of energy here with the fuel cell. And with the battery, we lose significantly less energy. We can put it up in a chart like this, where you can see we have 100 kilowatt of electricity. If we go the electrical vehicle road here, we lose some in the grid transmission, we lose around 10%. Then there is the conversion so that we can actually use the electricity in the car. And then in the car itself, we lose around 10%, even though we have the brake energy and all that stuff, we still lose 10%. So 100 kilowatt hours gives us around 69 kilowatt hours of effective energy in the car. When we look at the hydrogen here, we can see that there is a loss in the conversion, the electrolysis here. That's where we make the hydrogen. I should say that you can make it in other ways. There are a number of ways you can get the hydrogen out. But this is the most commonly used. You can also use a process where you're using steam for it, and that is very costly as well. And you have to use a lot of fossil fuels there as well. So we're just going with the electrolysis here. Then you can store it under high pressure, or you can store it as a liquid, very cold, and you're losing energy here as well. Then you have to deliver it, and now we are thinking that it has to be transported by a truck out to a tank station. You need there is some delivery loss here, and then in the fuel cells itself, you get an energy loss as well. So depending on which way you're going here, you are ending up with 23 or 19 kilowatt hours. And these numbers might even be too old now, because there are a lot of research done. And that is one thing we have to remember. A lot of people are telling me, yeah, well, it might not be the thing right now, but with all the research being done, it will be competitive to batteries in 10 or 20 years. That might be so, but just remember that there's a lot of research going on in the battery sector as well. And we know with Elon Musk and Tesla and so on, they are doing a lot to improve the batteries. So of course, the batteries will not stay at 69 as well. It will also go up. So there are a lot of things happening in this sector, and it is a very exciting sector to be in. Now, when we look at the price and the economy in this, we can have a look at this one, and this is what I have this from a YouTube channel called Cleaner Watt. I'll link to that below, as well as to several other YouTube videos. But this Cleaner Watt is a very good channel. I recommend that you look at that if you're interested in electrical vehicles and all the research going on with the different companies. But what we can see here is that 61.2 kilowatt hours produces 1 kilo of hydrogen, which in the new Toyota Mirai that is driving, that has hydrogen as a fuel source, that delivers around 106 kilometers or 66 miles of transportation. Now, if you have the same 61.2 kilowatt hours electricity stored in a battery, In the new Tesla Model 3 SR Plus here, you get 492 kilometers, so almost 5 times as much transportation capacity here. So that is an important thing to remember. Also, we have the hydrogen fuel prices right now going from around $13 to $16 per kilo. And that means that if you want to drive 106 kilometers or 66 miles, you need to pay somewhat around $14 per 100 kilometers, meaning that, for instance, a 500 kilometers trip would equal something like $90, whereas it is significantly cheaper with the electrical vehicle. That price will drop, and it is estimated to drop to $10 to $8 per kilogram of hydrogen, and in a bit more time, in a bit longer time horizon, we will see it drop to $3, $4, maybe $5 per kilogram, and then it starts to get in a range where it is very interesting. So that is something that is in a near future, but we are not there yet. All right, let's have a look at I have a couple of websites. Sorry for the messy chart there. I have some websites here that I'll link to below, and one of them is about different types of fuel cells. It says 12 hydrogen and fuel cell stocks, but it is an article from 2013, so it is not completely up to date. But it is a good article because it explains some of the different types of fuel cells that is out there, and I will go a bit more into depth with this in the upcoming videos where I'll talk about different hydrogen stocks. The mostly used right now, as far as I can tell, is the PEM fuel cells, where we are talking about the process I just mentioned. There are some other, we have the alkaline fuel cells, we have the molten carbonate fuel cells, and there are different types of fuel cells. As I said, I'll not go into that one yet, but when I'm mentioning the different hydrogen stocks, I will tell a bit more about what kind of technology they are using. Now, one interesting thing here is what kind of advantages and disadvantages we have when we are looking at hydrogen, because up until now I have only mentioned price, and that is of course a very important factor, but there are other factors to consider outside price. For instance, hydrogen is often used as an energy source in when you're traveling in space. And in space, there is quite far distance behind the charging stations for the batteries, so it can be a very big advantage to bring your own fuel up there, so you can control it a lot better. But that is another story. When we look at the different advantages of hydrogen fuel cells, it states here that it is readily available, and that is the whole argument, as I mentioned before, that it is the most abundant material in the universe, and that is kind of true. But as I mentioned, in Denmark, not in Denmark, also in Denmark, but in the world, on Earth, it is mostly stored in water, and that means that we have to split the water molecules, and then again we are back to the process that costs money. So it is readily available, that is true, but we need to have some better structures as to get the hydrogen and get that price down. It doesn't produce harmful emissions. That is true. When you're running a car on hydrogen, what you're actually doing is you're getting the H2 and the O back together, and the result is just water, H2O. So we pretty much just get water out of it. But then again, compared to electrical vehicle, that is kind of the same, just without any emissions, of course, not even water. That this is compared to diesel and gas, then absolutely hydrogen is a lot cleaner right here, right now, where you're using the car. It is environmentally friendly, yeah, well, kind of, depends on how you get the hydrogen, of course. It can be used as fuels in rockets, yes, it can. And it is fuel efficient, and that is compared to diesel and gas, because as we saw just a second ago, it is actually not as efficient when compared to electricity. So this is, then of course it is renewable, because you are taking water, you are using the electrolysis, and you're getting the hydrogen, the H2, And when you are going the opposite way, you're just getting water out of it, and that water, of course, is renewable, so you can use it once again. Now, the disadvantages here is that it is expensive. That is the one I've touched up on until now. It is difficult to store. Yes, I mentioned that. Either you have to put it under a lot of pressure, or you have to store it really, really cold. And some years ago, as a couple of scientists were out saying that they could store it in some sort of dry tablet form, but I've not seen that anywhere yet, and I think that was kind of a fluke. It is not easy to replace existing infrastructure, and that is of course the problem that Nikola and Trevor Milton has been in, because they want to roll out the hydrogen society, at least in the semi-truck sector. But the problem is that there are only a limited number of hydrogen tanks, meaning that you need to build the entire infrastructure, and you need to transport the hydrogen out if you can't produce it on site. So that will cost somewhere around $15 to $50 billion just for the semi-truck infrastructure thing here, and that will get very, very expensive. I know that Trevor Milton said he could do it at a fraction of the price, but that has not been shown up until yet. Then again, there's a thing about the hydrogen, it is highly flammable. There's a security thing here as well. We all know, remember the Hindenburg catastrophe, and I'm not talking about the Hindenburg research thing. That was a catastrophe for Nikola the other day. I'm talking about the balloon that went up in flames in, was it 1937 or something like that? And of course, that is a security issue we should consider. And then it depends on fossil fuels. It does, at least up until now. We don't have enough renewable energy to produce an abundant amount of hydrogen. So right now it is dependent on fossil fuels. But all of this you can read more about in depth. I also have a link to an article where there are some of the applications for hydrogen up until now. That is from something called Hydrogen Europe. Some kind of I don't know if it is an organization trying to boost the use of hydrogen actually, but they talk about the process here, and down here they talk about how it can be used in aviation, in boats, in trains, the trucks are one of the big sectors where they're using it right now, buses, all sorts of different passengers, cars and so on. So right now, hydrogen is becoming a big thing. However, right now, it is, as Elon Musk says, mind-boggling stupid. It doesn't have to be that in the future. And of course, when they started to produce the very first wind turbines, for instance, here in Denmark with a company called Vestas, or maybe in Siemens, the first wind turbines were also mind-boggling stupid, because it took more energy to produce them than they could ever earn back in energy production. But as we can see, when you're focusing on a field and researching in it, of course it doesn't stay mind-boggling stupid. But as of right now, we simply don't have a process where it is financially viable to go for this, for instance, in cars. But then again, as I'll get to in a second, there are some advantages more that we haven't touched on. So this is a website you can also go to. Now, comparing the hydrogen with the battery car, and I'll do this quick, so I'll end up in a couple of minutes here. But when we're looking at them, they have some similarities. Zero emission, high efficiency, electric drive. As I mentioned, they're both electrical and they're low noise. That is, of course, an advantage, sometimes at least. I saw some EV manufacturers that were considering putting some sort of fake noise in it, because it might be too dangerous in the traffic, because we're used to being able to hear the vehicles coming towards us. And when these are completely silent, that can be a security thing. In the EVs, we have the highest well-to-wheel efficiency. That's what I talked about. This is where we lose the least amount of energy. Low operational costs, sustainable city vehicles. So it is mostly for, at least for now, for shorter travel routes. whereas Nikola in the semi-trucks are planning for a lot more mileage in the hydrogen tank, and that is why they're using it, so the semi-trucks don't have to stop and charge a battery all the time. Low initial infrastructure cost, and this is what many people talk about with the EV and saying, yes, we already have an electrical grid. However, there are something that needs to be considered, because for instance in Denmark where I live, the government right now, they have a goal, an absolutely insane goal, they can never reach it, but they have a goal of, I think it is 1 million EVs in Denmark in the next 10 years. And first of all, that is not going to happen because we're not shifting out our cars so often, as far as I can tell. But another thing is that if you are living in a normal neighborhood and all of a sudden, let's say you have 100 houses on a road and they have gas vehicles, and all of a sudden they're shifting to electrical vehicles, then that would demand so much of the electrical grid that there would be no way on earth that the existing grid could actually deliver this kind of power to 100 cars in a normal neighborhood. So we would need in Denmark, even though we say that we have an existing electricity grid, then we would need to really scale that up at an insane level if we would need 1 million EVs in Denmark running on the road in 10 years. That is not going to happen, I can promise you that. All right, the hydrogen fuel cells, they are fueling faster. Right now the batteries are kind of slow and you can easily spend 30 or 60 minutes charging your cars. That is of course also something that, for instance, Tesla is working on, and that charging time will be brought down over the next 5 to 10 years significantly. I can promise you that. But the hydrogen simply fuels faster. It's pretty much like putting gas on your tank. You can drive further, at least for now, because when you fill up your tank, you have a lot more range in your car here. It might be more expensive, but you have more range. And that is one of the things that keeps me from buying an EV right now, is that it might be able to run 400 or 500 kilometers on a charge. However, if I'm going farther away, I would need to plan for stopping and charging my car, and that is simply too inconvenient for me. So with a fuel cell car, you could actually go further. Lower longer term infrastructure costs, I'm not sure what they calculate into this. And then they have all vehicle types, and that is of course, at least as of right now, the EV part is only for the very short term trucking routes of 200 to 300 kilometers, whereas the hydrogen semi-trucks, if you're going up to trucks and not talking about cars, you can simply put it in pretty much all vehicles because there's a lot more power and it is easier to bring along your own tank of energy here, or of fuels. So this is kind of the dilemma we are in right now, and this is what I'm going to touch on when I'm going to talk about different hydrogen companies in the upcoming videos. That is, what process are they using to get the hydrogen? What kind of customers are they aiming at? Because they might not be aiming at some sort of vehicles. It could be easily be at some sort of industrial use, or maybe usage in an area. It could be in, let's say, in a desert somewhere where you don't have an electricity grid, but where you have a new gold mine, for instance, but you want to run on something other than gas or diesel, but you don't have a strong enough electricity grid to deliver the electricity you need. Then hydrogen might be a viable solution. So there are a lot of ways you can use hydrogen where it makes sense. It might not in the future be the one and only fuel solution for normal cars or buses or something like that. We will have to wait and see for that. I don't really have an opinion about that, but I am 100% sure that hydrogen will have a place in the future of fuel. There's no doubt about that. And of course, there can come some big jump in research where all of a sudden we get the price down by 50%. But again, the same could be in the electrical space here, in the EV space, where all of a sudden Elon Musk comes out and say, yeah, well, now you can drive 1,200 miles on a charge of 5 minutes in a Tesla or whatever. So of course, research and development will happen, and I think it is great that we have them both, but in the future videos, as I said, I will focus on the hydrogen side of it, because there is a lot of exciting things happening right now. Then of course there is the whole Nikola side of it, but I'll not touch too much on that. I think you're pretty much feeling spammed by Nikola and Trevor Milton videos here from me. So let's just try and navigate outside Nikola and go into some of the other more solid, more stable stocks that we can invest in. Alright, that's all for now. Take care of yourself and your money out there. Remember to subscribe, like and comment down there below, and I'll talk to you again very soon.